All right, cool. All right, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, whoever you are and watching this, my name is Matt. I'm CEO of A1 Solutions Group. We help people with really not just fixing their credit, but educating their credit. And this is the very first series of interviews I'm doing with people in other industries that I work with because we are aiming to do more than just credit repair, credit and then some. I have today, fortunately, it's been delayed a number of times. She's been sick. I've forgotten all this crazy crap. I have the lovely Lindsay Warnes to talk to us about a past life she once had in the world of debt collectors, shall I say, right? And me doing credit repair, we deal with them. But I'll let you take on to introduce yourself. We'll start from there, Lindsay. So thank you for joining me today and having this interview.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be your very first interviewee.
The first one.
Yeah, I'm glad we could finally connect.
Yeah.
So, my name is Lindsay Warnes, and I'm with Willow Legal Group. We are in Maryland. We practice estate planning now. So we do wills, trusts, elder care, long-term care planning, and special needs, some other things that go along with estate planning. But in a former life, and this was probably, I want to say 2009 or 9-ish.
Ooh, that's a while ago. I was
It's
a
been a
young
while.
buck, 20 years old, running around doing crazy stuff, and you're like, here I am defending the people from the evil debt collectors.
Yes. I did represent people who were being sued by third-party debt buyers, debt collectors.
Gotcha. How did you get into that? Like, how did you, like, who? I've never heard anyone be like, you know what? One day I'm gonna represent people being sued by third party. No one says it. Like, how did you get to that point? Where you're like, well, I'm here. Let's go.
So interesting story. It's one of those stories where I landed there through various avenues, I guess. So while I was waiting for bar results, I took the bar in July of 2007, and my husband at the time, he is not my husband anymore. Story for a different day.
Past
But
life.
he was in the Army, and he was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So I took the bar, and then I moved to North Carolina to stay with him. And I got a job kind of interning at the legal assistance office on post.
Yeah.
And the woman in charge there, she's a civilian, but she's a brilliant lawyer, got me into it. Her little niche was service members who were being sued by third-party debt collectors.
Ooh.
And they weren't complying with the Service Member Civil Relief Act, meaning that there was certain requirements to notice of lawsuits.
Yeah.
So she was explaining to me how they would get notice, the soldiers would come in and bring her these lawsuits, and then she would get them all dismissed because they hadn't complied with the requirements of that act, basically.
Yeah.
And so she was super passionate about it. And then I moved up to Maryland after that. He left, I think he got out at that point, doesn't matter. I ended up in Maryland and I opened up my own firm. And so I stayed in touch with her. And she told me about this organization called the National Association of Consumer Advocates, NACA. And I joined, and I learned all about the world of consumer protection. And that was just one little area. I mean, it's foreclosure prevention, which I ended up doing a lot of that too. It's auto fraud, it's lemon law, it's all of the consumer protection stuff. And this is all pre-Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And actually that woman works for CFPB now. So
wow.
She's still doing all of that work. And it was really eye-opening, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but I don't do it anymore because I realized I hated being in court. And honestly, this kind of work is part of the reason that I hate litigation.
Why is like being in court like what's the word? Is it take too much of your time, or is it just like a needless game? Like from your experience, like what about that?
So for me, I'm not an adversarial person. So it's obviously very adversarial. You have somebody suing somebody. So somebody's been wronged and they're suing. And of course, the person that has been sued is not happy, and just nobody's happy and everybody's fighting. Also, if you've ever been to court, you have to sit there and wait and wait and wait and wait. So it was really a lot of it. I just felt like my time could be used elsewhere. And I also felt like this just isn't conducive to me as a, my personality.
Yeah.
But also you are leaving whenever there's a lawsuit involved or any kind of legal matter in the court, you're leaving it up to a stranger, a judge,
Yeah.
to decide,
About that.
or a jury in some cases. But these claims are all small claims, and they're all just in the lower court of the state, and it's up to a judge. And it's a crapshoot on who you're going to get. And yes, there are laws that they're supposed to follow, but it's not always the case. And it became very frustrating and very disheartening. And I'm going to tell you one of the stories of just the most just disheartening and horrible story for one of my clients. And that's when I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Wow.
Like, I cannot do this anymore. So
sounds like a very what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a dark place to work in, because it's like it's needed, but it sounds like, so that leads to the next question. Like, what are things about the industry that a lot of people just don't realize or just don't know or not aware of?
right. So aside from the whole court process in general, which most people are not familiar with it. So with third-party debt buyers specifically, and again, this is all Maryland specific. I don't know how other states do stuff, but in Maryland, a third-party debt collector, and when I say third-party debt collector, I'm talking not like Discover Card, not Bank of America. This is some random law firm that represents some other company who has purchased their debt, and I think people don't realize this, from your credit card. So if you have a credit card from Discover and you default and whatever, eventually Discover is going to write it off as a loss. They are going to batch your account and the money that you owe with a whole bunch of other people, and they are going to sell it to a third-party debt buyer. And their job, this company, this third-party debt buyer, that's what they do. They buy this batch of debts for pennies on the dollar. So if they let's say the balance you owed was $1,000, they're going to buy it for essentially maybe $1. I mean, it's there's not a science for it because it's all batched. So they're buying like hundreds of accounts.
Yeah.
And they're hoping that they'll be able to collect on some of them. And so it's a very good investment for them. And then Discover, or the initial creditor, will just write it off on their taxes. And so they're really not hurt as much as you want to think. And I know nobody feels bad for them, but so I don't think people realize that that's what's happening. So they're getting a letter saying you've been sued by ABC law firm on behalf of your Discover card. And you're like, oh crap. Oh yeah, I didn't pay that. And so a lot of people want to call them and say whatever they want to say to this law firm. And usually I saw it go one of two ways. They would call the law firm and try to work it out, or they would go to court and try to defend themselves. Well, actually three things. Or they would just ignore it, or they were never served to begin with. Either way, they just ignore it. And in Maryland, there's something called an affidavit judgment. And what that means is you fill out your petition saying I'm suing somebody, and then you attach proof, pieces of paper that are proof of whatever. In this case, it would be the debt owed. So what would you think the proof might be that a creditor should attach to a lawsuit?
Well, the creditor or their debt collector?
They're one and the same, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Proof, some sort of, I would think, payment history or the contract that you sign, whatever it is, to be like, this is yours. To be like, this is theirs, because they have to show that. Right.
So correct. You need to show that first there's a contract that you said you were going to pay this debt. So then once it's billed, well, then obviously that you owe it. So the outstanding. Well, then once it's sold, who do you owe the money to?
To the debt collector, supposedly, but legally you don't owe it.
Do you? Because if they can't prove that they actually bought your account.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So what would happen? Right. So there's a chain of custody, right? A bill of sale. So what was happening was people would get these lawsuits with these affidavit judgment petitions.
Mm-hmm.
And all that would be attached was a generic credit card contract, because those contracts don't have your name on them.
Right.
And a couple statements showing an an outstanding balance that you didn't pay, and that would be about it. So that's enough to scare somebody to say, oh crap, I guess I owe this.
Right.
But it never showed the chain of custody. It never showed that you agreed to that contract. It never showed that anybody purchased that debt that contained your specific account. So there were holes. So what would happen was people would not go to court, and they would get judgments entered against them, and then their wages would start getting garnished. And they were like, what's going on here? The other thing that would happen is people that did try to call the company or the lawyers, because they always had lawyers representing them, they would call the law firm. And when you call and you say, yes, I owe this money, then you're admitting it. And they would use the other little thing too is there's a statute of limitations. So from the time that you don't owe, or the time that you stop paying, and it's a little bit different, there's little triggers, but in general, the time that you default, you have in Maryland 3 years for them to sue you for it.
Right.
But if you do anything to readmit that you owe it, it starts over. So the minute you say, yes, I owe it, even if it was more than 3 years ago, that starts a new 3-year clock.
The clock starts all over again. Oh my God.
And nobody knows this. I mean, people don't know this. And, especially like good, honest people who they wanted to pay their bills, they just couldn't. They want to explain themselves. That's a horrible idea.
Oh, and it's all recorded too. And like that's just like, thanks for all the evidence you're giving me, but sure, I'll listen. And that's nuts.
Right. So, and it's not, and that's the thing. So I think it's just people don't realize that that's the process. That's how things are happening. And so they would get caught up in this little lawsuit, and they would end up losing for lots of reasons. And then their wages end up getting garnished, or they get judgments on their record. And you know what that can do to credit reports. So it just became a very, it's like a very difficult, cycle for people to get into.
Jeez.
And, my specific client that I want to tell you about, one of your questions that you asked me was, what was the worst thing I saw? And this is it. And I can't be the only person that this has ever happened to, or my client. She got behind on credit cards. Smart girl, got behind on credit cards, wanted to settle her debt, started working with a debt consolidation company. She made payments to them, and she paid off that debt. Well, her credit card company, I don't remember which one it was probably Discover, Citibank, one of those, had sold her debt to a third-party debt collector anyway. Because once they sell it, they don't know what you're doing. And once it goes to like once it's being sold, if you're doing negotiations through a credit repair, whatever negotiating company, once they've sold your debt, they're hands off.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what happened. So she had made all these payments to a debt consolidation repair company, whatever it was, and had paid off the debt or most of it.
Yeah.
So then she gets a letter, a lawsuit from a third party debt buyer, from their lawyers. And she shows up in court with her proof that, wait, I've already paid this. How can you be suing me for this? Because again, she didn't know it was she didn't know the way it works.
Right.
She shows up in court, she checks in, and the way that the court system worked here, you go in, you check in with the little person sitting in front of the clerk, sitting in front of the judge's bench, and then you sit and you wait. Well, you know who's up there just hanging out? The lawyer for the debt buyer, because they're in there so frequently, they're friends with all the clerks and the bailiffs.
Right. I read about that. Yeah.
So she goes up to them and he says, oh, hey, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh, I'm here for my case. And he goes, oh, okay, well, you don't need to be here. And she's like, oh, okay. He's like, I'll let the judge know you were here.
Oh,
she's like, oh, okay. Yeah, you see where this is going.
That is such a trap.
So she was like, okay, because why would she know? She'd never been to court before, had no idea. So long story short, she left. And then a few weeks later, she started getting a wage garnishment notice.
No.
And that's when she called me And so we retraced everything. We tried to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
I filed appeals. Unfortunately, I actually called the attorney's firm and I was like, look at all this proof. And they're like, well, too bad. They kept garnishing her wages despite me telling them, showing them the proof. I mean, it was awful. She ended up paying the card off essentially twice and with interest.
Jeez.
And the reason that our appeals got denied was because after that affidavit judgment that got entered, because she failed to appear, even though she was there.
Yeah.
You only have 30 days to to contest it. And she didn't contact me within that 30 days because I don't know if she didn't realize what she got the notice from the court, didn't realize what it was.
Yeah.
So by law, she had missed the deadline. I filed 2 or 3 appeals using different avenues, and the judges were basically just like, nope, tough. And so we spent a year and a half, I think, trying to get this reversed. And she only paid, I did it for $500. So, I mean, that really wasn't worth my investment either, but
yeah.
whatever. It was all principal at that point. But, and she never got her money back. We never got an apology. We never got anything. It was greed, greed, greed. Jeez. And, it just, I mean, I'm still in touch with her.
Yeah.
That was enough for me. And then fast forward, I will tell you there's somewhat of a silver lining. I was part of a lobbying group on the consumer protection bar. We did get it changed. So the affidavit judgments have to have a certain checklist of things of proof of ownership. Right. So that people can't just have these, BS judgments entered against them without proof, because that's what was happening is they were getting judgments without. The plaintiff still has the burden to prove their case.
Yeah.
So if they don't have that proof, how can they win?
Right, exactly. And
so we did get the law changed a bit. So that's
good. More in your favor.
Yeah. So sorry, that was a very long-winded.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's good if you didn't hear this. But like, that leads me to another question. It's like, you've seen that, but having done however so many years, like, what are some of like the shady things you would see these law firms that are trying to do besides that one? Like, what are the things they try and do that, but then again, people aren't aware of, and you'd be like, how are you, what drug are you on today? And can I get some too, to be like, what are you thinking? Because I know they try and find loopholes and things. I've done some other research what they'll do. And again, they're preying off people's ignorance and fear. That's how they get you. Right. And they're banking on you not asking certain questions, things like, but what were the shady things you'd see do? You go like, what are you doing? You definitely can't do that. That's definitely illegal. I don't know about illegal necessarily. I'm sure it happens, but some of the shady stuff they do is, like you said, like people don't know what to do. So just the robocalls, just the constant calling. The minute you admit you owe the money, in any form, you have trapped yourself. So that's one of the things they do. And while it's legal, and while it's, I won't say all the way shady, that's what they do, is they call you and they're like, oh, I'm calling from so-and-so. And they try to get you to admit that you owe this debt. So they try and trick you instead of saying like, this is attempt collected debt, and they'll do that, right?
And I'm not talking like the scams that are like, you need to send a gift card to whatever.
Oh yeah, that.
But so people, and like I said, people want to explain themselves. So instead of just saying, send me proof, and hanging up, send me written proof.
Right.
People talk.
Right.
And that ends up hurting them. Because the minute you take that to court, well, the judge is going to say, well, I mean, did you have this conversation? Well, yeah. Did you say you owe the money? Well, yeah. Because your defense otherwise is a third-party debt collector. You say, prove I owe it. It's your job to prove that this is my account. This is how much I owe. You purchased it on the date, and this is within the statute of limitations.
Right.
Your job to prove that.
Right.
You cannot win.
Right.
So
So funny enough, another like lady I work with who does insurance, she told me all the funny things that she said to debt collectors. And I don't think she admitted it, but one she would like to mess on it. And let me know if it's you can say this, but she would tell them, I'll pay the debt what you bought it for.
That's funny.
And I'm like, that's gold. And I'm like, I'll pay you what you bought it for. And I really want to know if you could say that. I'm willing to bet the person would be like, I don't think they would know. Because I think the other thing people don't realize is that the person you're talking to is a person who's an employee on the phone. And
Correct.
that person, as much as they try to be nice, probably been yelled at, cussed at by who knows how many people, because all they're trying to do is get paid. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yeah, I mean, and they probably don't even understand how their own industry works. They're just
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
yeah, well, I mean, honestly, like there are these employees that are being told call and get these people to pay. Like they probably don't know anything. I
Okay.
mean, they don't know
Right. Okay.
the
So
legal, you know.
let me ask this because I've been also been like one thing I was gonna ask like what are things you can do? One thing I've told people and did this myself. Like you said, you don't want to admit to anything, and there's no law anywhere in the United States that says when they call you, you have to verify anything. You don't say anything, so they'll keep calling you, right? So one thing I've done, told people, said, look, you don't tell them who you are. You just ask, what is this about, and then
Mhm.
say, tell me, take me off your call list, and repeat those same two. And it's funny enough, the first time I tried this, the one lady I could tell she's getting frustrated. She was like, I just need to know that this is Matt Dillon. I'm like, what's it about? Tip call us. And she was like, fine, click, haven't heard from him. Another one
Yeah.
called me. The guy got so disheartened. He was kind of like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, click. And I was like,
Yeah, and honestly, if you ask, I believe there's a federal law that says if you ask to be removed from their list, they have to remove you, and if they
yeah,
don't, it can be a violation of
it's a
the.
violation. They can get sued for it. Yeah.
Um, and that's the other thing. Like if you get the letters, I don't know if they're still sending letters in the mail.
They still are. They do. People get them. They know how to go with that. And that's not something I don't know. Like if they get a letter, like what's one thing that they can do to like to respond to it? Because otherwise,
You
they
can
can also use
have
that.
them send a proof letter, a demand proof letter.
Okay.
I used to have templates of them on my computer. I don't know if I still do, but basically it's exactly that. You send a letter back, you know, and you say, I received this letter. You say I owe this. I demand proof that I owe this. And if they don't send you that proof, again, they can't win.
Right.
So if they do try to sue you and then you end up in court, you take all of this. Well, I sent them this letter and they didn't demand, you know, they didn't send me proof. So it's ways to just get back at them, kind of like you just said, without admitting anything. Because the biggest thing I think people need to remember is they have the burden of proof, not the defendant. You may sit here and know that you owe that money,
Right.
and it's fine, but they need to prove that you owe that money. Now,
Yeah.
if it's Discover Card calling you, that's a little bit different because you have a direct contract with Discover.
Right.
This is limited to, you know, the third party buyers. So yeah,
Gotcha.
good times, great industry to be in, right?
No, I don't want to do that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I just probably I feel like what happened with your client, then I also guess people would get burnout after a while because it's a nonstop thing. And I honestly don't understand how debt collection is legal. Because let's think about it, right? At the end of the day, let's use us for example. I owe you money.
Mhm.
Let's say it's $1,000. You can't get the money from me for like a whole year.
Mhm.
13 months, a month after your year, I come to you, Lindsay, and Lindsay, I have your $1,000, and you go, too late, I don't want it back. Now, if you said that, I'd be like, I owe you money. What do you mean you want it back? Unless it's been like years later on, right? But in this case, most people want their money back, right? And instead, you go, nope, sorry, you now have to pay that money to Jorge. You're like, I'd be like, who the hell's Jorge? He comes on and goes, are you mad? Yeah. You owe money to her? Cool. Now you owe me money. That's literally how it goes.
Yeah.
A debt that you owed somebody else goes to that you owe from a creditor goes to somebody else who now says you owe me money with when there was no written contract that you signed with the third party debt collector.
Correct. And that's exactly that's a really good way of saying like what happened with my client is she was using the debt, consolidation, whatever kind of company it was
It
with
sounded like it's not debt
debt
consolidation. It sounded like
negotiation. What are they
yeah,
called?
yeah,
The
debt
negotiation.
negotiation. No, debt settlement. That destroys your
Debt
credit.
settlement. Thank you.
Yeah, that destroys your credit because they tell you
It,
don't pay your bills, but pay
well,
us, and then it gets charged off.
but they were paying her credit card.
Okay. Then that's debt consolidation. That's different.
Whatever it was. I don't remember who it was. It was
So
one of
someone screwed
those
up
that,
somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, we had proof of payments going
Wow.
to, and I'm just using Discover because I can't think of another one.
It's fine.
But
Start Bank of America. It's all good.
yeah, but we had proof that her company she paid to negotiate her bills down was making the payments to Discover, but in the meantime, Discover had sold the debt, so they weren't passing the money along to Jorge. I don't know what they were doing with it. They
Someone jacked up
back.
somewhere. Yeah.
Right. And so and the reason it's legal if it's done correctly.
Okay.
And done correctly, let's use your Jorge example. You owe me money, but then I decide, well, I'm just going to write it off. And you're right. It's always on the 13th month. But then I get a tax break for that.
Right.
And so that's why it's okay. So what I have done is I have assigned my right to Jorge. So in a non-sketchy, nice world, you come to me on month 14 and say, I have your money. I say, ooh, okay, that's cool. I actually gave that right to Jorge. So here's his number, or give it to me and I'll forward it to him. Whatever. Right. It's my responsibility, or it should be my responsibility to tell you who now has that money.
Yeah.
Or is entitled to receive it, because you can assign your interest in things.
Right.
And it happens all the time. And it's just that I think part of the problem is, and I'm not defending these big banks, but part of the problem is they have so many departments.
Yeah.
That none of them talk to each other. So it's bound to break down.
Right.
And I'm not saying that there's not like seedy stuff going on also, but when you're dealing with 3 human beings, of course that's a much easier strategy. But like when you have these big giant banks, and I did this with the foreclosure stuff too, like I was trying to help people negotiate foreclosure during the bubble break, bubble breaks, trying to negotiate foreclosure mediations and modifications and all the things, and I would have to call like 6 departments to get anybody. It was a nightmare. And so people just don't, and I don't know if it's set up intentionally with these big banks just to hurt the little guy, but people just get like you said, burn out, and they're like, whatever, I guess I pay, I guess I owe it, like whatever, and just they don't want to deal with it anymore. I mean, I didn't want to deal with it anymore, and that was my job.
Yeah, you're just done with it at that point. Jeez. I guess I think my last question would be like, and we kind of covered this throughout the whole interview here, but when it comes to debt collectors, from what you tell me from Maryland, from just Maryland, what are the rights people have when it comes to them, and like if they're gonna go about doing it, like what should they do?
Well, get proof. And I will say I do think that here at least the debt buyers in the industry have gotten a little bit better about at least having that proof.
Yeah.
So, but demand proof. If they send it to you and it's not within, if the date that you defaulted, meaning the date you stopped paying,
yeah, is
within 3 years of them contacting you, and they show you actual proof that they are entitled to, that they're the Jorge, that they're entitled to collect, you probably don't have a defense.
Okay.
And you should do your best to negotiate, because they'll probably negotiate with you.
Oh, yeah.
But if they can't provide that, or if it's outside the 3 years, I would call a lawyer and see what your options are.
Yeah.
And you can look them up on the National Association of Consumer Advocates website. They have a find an attorney by, different issues, as well as locations. So yep. It's a great organization. But I would say if you think that they can't prove their case, make them do it. And then if you win, they're going to pay your attorney's fees.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Didn't know that part. Sue them and win. Ooh, they can pay me and they'll get that money.
Well, yeah, because if you've been wronged,
Hmm.
then you shouldn't have to pay for your defense. So
Yeah.
set up that way. The
Oh,
Maryland has a Consumer Protection Act. It has its own. I don't know about Virginia or DC.
okay. Well, I can find out through
Yeah.
research. That's cool. That's good to know for people to know about that. Like there's rights and things that you can do to protect yourself from this. Because otherwise, anyone else watches, like, don't just ignore it. Do
No.
the phone calls, write the demand letter, get proof because you have rights. Don't let them boss you around or scare you.
Right.
Or don't explain yourself. Just simple questions. What is this about? Tell me to call us. What is it about? Do any call us.
Yeah, don't engage. Just yeah, don't engage and then make them provide proof. But also like do some research before you say anything. Like research, Google the company.
Yeah.
Find out who's calling you, ask who they're calling, where they're calling you from, who do they represent before giving them anything. Like, because, let's say it's so and so law firm. Well, we represent ABC debt buyer
Right.
who bought it from big credit card.
Right.
Yeah. Who do you represent?
Right.
Who am I talking to? And
Yeah.
then do some research, Google, see what you can find.
Hmm.
Um, and, but I would say if you're feeling the least bit like there's some sketchiness, at least consult with an attorney that knows about all of the laws. And most of
Right.
them, I think, will give you a free consultation. Or it might be worth your time to pay whatever the low consultation fee is just to see if you have a case. Or
Right.
if you just try to negotiate.
Right. Yeah. Because I've seen it happen with a couple of my clients when they themselves have been sued, and when that happens, I'm like, I don't really know, so let me try and recommend you somebody else. Because at that point, I don't know how long it's been, what the issue is. They come to me and I go, hey, all right, here's what we're doing with the credit report. We're gonna dispute these things. After that, I go, all right, you talk to when he knows this stuff. So that's my. I'm not gonna say legal advice. Is go here and see what can be done. Because I'm not going to tell you something and then get and be wrong about it and then also in trouble. I'm not trying to do that. It's not
No,
right.
don't do that. But let me ask you this. What does it like if someone gets a judgment, a money judgment on their credit report? What does that do to their credit report?
Damages your credit score. Bing. It drops it. People see it on there because at the end of the day, whoever's watching is like when I tell my clients now that if you're trying to get your credit cleaned up, it's about looking good on paper because very, very, very few places will ask you, hey, what happened? Talk to us. It's okay. Very few places will. And then the thing is, if you do, it's a very humbling, embarrassing experience to have to provide more information than what's needed to get a job opportunity, whatever it is. It's ridiculous. But they see that and they'll go, oh, you have a judgment, which means you didn't care to pay them and whatever. And then you got sued and then you went to pay, which means if we give you this loan, for example, there's a good probability we may have to go through a terrible time trying to get the money back from you or whatever you're trying to do. It doesn't matter if you're trying to get a loan, financing, it's not a good look. Right. You can still be taken off, but you don't want to have it go on there. It's public record too as well. So
oh yeah, 100%. And but yeah, so if there's any question about whether you owe the money,
question
it. Well, question it, right. And then if you do, try to negotiate it. Do everything you can to avoid that judgment.
Yep. Oh, and then if you do owe and negotiate it and it's on your credit report, you want to negotiate a pay for deletion. And some places will be like, we can't do that. Bullshit. You put it on there, you can take it off. Okay. It's total crap. Okay. And you negotiate pay for deletion, and before you make a payment, you want that sucker in writing. Because if you don't do that, they'll go, okay, great, take your money, and then they won't do it. And then what happens is, right, you pay it, whatever it's yours, you owe it. If you don't negotiate pay for deletion, it then gets updated to a paid collection, which is still a negative item. People still view it negatively, still wrecks your credit. And then that has to be disputed to be taken off because also with that, when a collection is first placed in credit report, 7-year time limit, right? You wait 3 years and then you decide to pay it and you don't negotiate pay for deletion, it gets updated to pay collection and then the account can get re-aged and the clock starts all over again. So unfortunately, in that case, it should be you pay the debt, your credit gets better and it improves, but it doesn't. It goes against you. So that's why if you're going to do that, if you owe it, negotiate a paper deletion because getting it off your file will help your credit. And then no one has to know it ever happened.
Right. Agreed. And yeah, and that's the thing, like, and the other thing I really, really want to stress, because I hear this so often, don't throw anything away. If you start getting letters from debt collectors or their attorneys, or if you do any of this negotiating and do not throw it away. I had a call from a client. It was a totally different thing, but no, it was something related to this. And one of my my old coworker. And she said, I had a friend that was sued, and whatever, and they had a settlement. And I said, well, then just take the settlement agreement to court, and then they won't have to go back to court. Well, she threw it away.
Oh no!
Why would you do that? Don't throw anything away. Those are
the.
So yeah, if you are talking to them, if you're negotiating anything, get it in writing and don't throw it away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I still have stuff from probably 15 years ago that I know I don't need for cars I had like 15 years ago. Like,
but it's good to keep because it could happen. You're like, why is this coming back now? Because mistakes happen. It's a big system's complicated. You're one person out of thousands, 100,000 people, and like stuff happens. Like I've seen it, and people just don't understand that like it's a system, and it's real easy to say it's evil, which you can argue that it is. It at the best, it can be very exploitive of people. Okay, at its best, but knowing how to play the game, knowing what rights you have, and knowing that, then you have a fighting chance to go, all right, cool, I've done what I can. It is what it is, cool. Versus not and realizing that you didn't have to pay something that you don't legally owe.
Right.
People understand that.
And another thing just to note, and I don't know about Virginia, but Maryland is a two-party consent state for recording. So yeah, so if somebody calls and they say this call is being recorded, you say
you can be like, I don't consent to this.
I'm not consenting to the recording, so don't record it.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm looked up for Virginia too.
Yeah, some states are one party, so only one person has to know. Yeah,
I'm writing it out right now.
Yeah, so Maryland is a two-party consent state, so you don't have to consent to record a conversation. Now, keep that in mind. If anything gets said that you want to be on the record, you just didn't consent to it, so you can't either. But
okay, but it's good to know. So it's almost like a nice sort of like strategy playing a game of chess. Like, how do I want to go about this? Do I want to not consent or say stuff on there so this way it comes back? I have on record that I said I don't agree with this. So at least people can to know this, and I hope people watch this. If you're afraid with these people, don't remember the person calling you is an employee who's just trying to get paid so they can pay their bills. They have no grudge. They, like you said earlier, there's a good chance that how the industry works. They show up to work and they're like, great, I got to deal with people want to cuss me out. Also, who knows what their day is like? It's not fun for them, and I think I read somewhere that if you were an employee in the industry, it's a high turnover rate or high attrition rate, whatever.
I can't imagine it would. I don't know why anybody would want to stay in that.
I don't know, but there's that. You have rights, you have things. Hopefully, this helps that you're not just, helpless.
And it doesn't mean that you're not going to owe the money. It just means that it's being done the right way.
Yeah, you're doing your part and making them prove that they got to do work versus just let me call you, scare you, and trick you, and then now we have you on record, and if you're not going to pay, then I'll sue you and all this other stuff. It just downward spiral.
Not everything they do is an FCRA violation. Like some of them are legitimate. So I do want to, just like, I did criminal defense too, and I do believe that everybody, guilty or not, needs to make sure that there are rules in place and they need to be followed. And that doesn't mean that I wanted my client to walk free if they committed a crime. I just wanted to make sure that they got everything was done fairly. And it's the same idea. Like if you owe the money, you probably owe the money. You probably owe the money.
Right.
But if they're not making proper collection attempts, that's not fair to you.
Yeah, no, it's not. So
that's my takeaway is this isn't like a how to get out of paying your debt thing. It's just to make sure that it's
you can
legit.
YouTube that or talk to a lawyer that's doing that, and then they'll also, other than that, this is her closing argument.
That is not my legal advice here.
No, it's not legal advice. Just saying, like,
Right.
mic drop. It's all good though.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Lindsay. I appreciate you for being here. I have no more questions. That was awesome. It's very, very valuable. Very, very valuable.
Yeah.
Can't
It
wait
was
to
fun.
get the recording up and have people go, I had no idea. And this is just Maryland. So if you're in another state, do some research, know what your rights are, what you can do to make sure this goes the correct way versus turning into, pardon my language, a shit show that can really punch you in the gut financially down the line and all this other crap that you just don't want to get into. So
Agreed.
yeah. All right. So I thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'll see you in the next interview.